What is happening, my people? It is I, Cool Cat Jack, and with me is my special guest, the Fuzz. Welcome to the Knuckle Dragger's Guide to Culture. Are you looking for a way to show off your superior knowledge to all those troglodytes that stumble and grunt around you? Do you want to be the smoothest conversationalist at your lunch break? Then get ready to be the master of superficial intelligence. Movies, music, books, TV shows, video games, history, politics, sexy cave women, and interrupting dogs. We have it all. Knuckle Dragger's Guide to Culture, because it's time to give your dome some love. Nailed it on the first try. Well, okay, everybody, so as you guys just heard in the intro this time, I'm not actually doing an episode with my buddy Logan today. So everybody say hi. Well, he's going by the Fuzz right now. Yeah, so a few announcements. We're not done with Trigon yet. We're almost done, so me and Logan will be getting on that. This is the guy I was telling you guys about having a special project with. This isn't that either. I mean, I guess I'll just say it. We're looking on to Jared Laudner. If you guys don't remember Jared Laudner, he was the person who shot Gabrielle Giffords in, early 2010-ish?
Was in January of 2010.
But we're still working on that. I haven't had time, honestly, with work to really do enough research, so that may be a little while coming. In the meantime, because I didn't want to leave you guys with nothing, and since Trigon's not ready, we've got a couple things. We're going to do an episode with the Blair Witch Project, and I'm going to do that Bible Man recording that I promised everybody. That's an off thing, though. But yeah, we're looking at the Blair Witch Project today. First, disclaimers. Number one, we're not experts at anything. We're just people living life. We're going to get things wrong. If we get things wrong, let us know. Like, comment, subscribe in the bottom or whatever. Next disclaimer, we are going to spoil the living hell out of this movie. So, if you want to watch the movie, and we are looking at the movie that came out in 96, July 1996, right?
July 16th, 1996.
Yeah.
With a limited release, July 14th, 1996.
And we're just looking at the movie. We're not looking at the sequel. We're not looking at any of the other supplemental things. But if you want to have a spoiler-free thing, here's your spoiler-free review. It's about 3 people that go to shoot a documentary in the woods, and they all disappear. Crazy shit happens. We find the footage. It's a found footage film. It's actually the original found footage film. It's really good. You should watch it if you like stories with atmosphere. Next, this show is not for kids. So Jimmy. Look, man, just go. Stop it. Stop trying to sneak in with your friends in a big old coat and, trying to pretend you're an adult like that. What was that guy from BoJack Horseman?
Vincent Adult Man.
Vincent Adult Man, yeah. Stop trying to be Vincent Adult Man. Where to start with this film? Well, I guess we should start with the intro. So, at the beginning of the film, we have a text scroll that says that in 1993, we have our 3 protagonists. We got Heather, Josh, and Mike, and they were shooting a documentary on something called the Blair Witch. Yeah, so they go and they pick up Mike. They start filming the intro, and again, so this film is shot from hand-recorded things. It's like I said, it's like the first found footage film. That's the kind of thing we get. We get a very amateurish feel with the film. It starts out, they have really grainy old films. 90s is fuck too, because I listen to Smashing Pumpkins in the beginning too.
And they say man probably 1,000 times throughout the movie.
Yeah. They're on their way to Bakersville?
Burksfield?
Burksfield, okay.
Which used to be Blair.
So it's originally it was this small colonial town that was started by I think they said 20 families originally. There's a lot of stories about that area. And they at the beginning of the film, they start out, they're getting along pretty well. And they just start interviewing locals in the area about different legends and stories.
They also do mention high amount of infant mortalities in the 1940s that are unexplained.
Yeah, something about after people coming back from World War II, a bunch of children just die inexplicably. They ask a bunch of people in the area about the Blair Witch. One lady mentions a story she heard about a couple guys that went camping or something. But she mentions in that story that they go missing or something. And then there was an old guy who talks about this weird loner dude that lived in the woods that used to kidnap kids in the area.
Takes kids down to the basement and makes one face the corner while he kills the other one because he thinks their eyes are watching him.
Another one is mentioned. They mention this old lady that lives out in the middle of nowhere, and she talks about seeing the Blair Witch, which apparently is this humanoid-like thing that wears a shawl and it has animal hair all over its body. One of the guys, there's these 2 fishermen they talk about. One of them is kind of saying that it's a bunch of bullshit. The other one talks about how he saw it floats without putting its feet on the ground or something like that.
Like a witch.
Yeah, like I said, they have a bunch of stories. So, anyway, they also mentioned something called Coffin Rock, which is a place where a couple men were found after they were found tied together with their entrails pulled out. I guess Native Americans at the time, something had done that to them. And so what they decided to do is, after interviewing the locals who tell them about all these little local legends about the Blair Witch, these weird hermits and all this weird shit happening in the area, they decide they're going to go to a couple areas in the woods. They're going to go see this cabin, and then they're going to go to Coffin Rock. And that's pretty much what they're doing for their documentary. And this is when we get a first bits of tension with these characters. So Heather is the leader of the group. She's the one who put this project together. It's her and Josh. Well, Josh found Mike to help with the film. They had rented out some cameras to do this. We don't really know Josh and Heather's relationship. You get kind of a vibe that they've been friends for a long time. Mike has just joined them. The first bit of tension starts where they get to Coffin Rock, and she does her little story. And they see the cabin first, they videotape the cabin, and then they go to Coffin Rock. And it's when they're heading back things start getting weird, because on their way there, it's mentioned that they were off trail, because they had this map that was mapping out everything. But it's mentioned a couple times that Heather often goes off the trail to find things that was mentioned by the locals. And this creates some tension because they often get lost. And Heather refuses to admit when she's lost or wrong. This is a common thing in the story. Like, navigation seems to be a thing that it's almost as if the forest is changing around them.
I'm also convinced that Heather doesn't know how to read the map.
Well, the thing is, too, Josh also checks the map several times, and they still end up going and getting lost. In the original part of their project, they were going to be there for like a day or so. They were going to go videotape these areas, and then they were going to head back to their car. And it's really on their way back from these locations that things start to get weird. So every night they start hearing things. The first night they hear some noises outside, and it's not a big deal, but ooh, it's spooky. Then they wake up in the morning and there's like a bunch of rocks.
Yeah, there's 3 piles of rocks.
Yeah. And
they were not there the previous morning.
These aren't like just random rocks. These are like flat stones, and they're put up in like little pyramid-looking things. Mike and Heather don't seem to get along too. Particularly, Mike gets on Heather's case whenever they're lost. Josh seems to be kind of the middleman who tries to keep the two of them from snipping at each other too much.
There's also something funny I find when they're eating dinner that night, that they're roasting the Vienna sausages.
That's a random observation. But yeah, they're like roasting Vienna sausages. So the beginning of the film seems to be going okay. There's a little bit of tension, but for the most part they're going okay. The problem starts when they get to this lake. And the issue is, every time that they find this lake, they end up, no matter which direction they go or which part of the map they follow, they always end up back at this lake.
It's a stream, not a lake.
Stream, whatever. It's a lake, stream, whatever. So they end up at this stream, and then so you get this feeling that the forest is forcing them back to these locations. Also, they start running out of supplies. Obviously, that starts building up tension, and at night things are getting worse. So, like the second night, the sounds are getting closer, I believe. So they wake up and there's even more of these stones. And again, the tension starts to build up too, because Heather is obsessed with this documentary to the point where oftentimes she's videotaping things that they probably should be focusing on getting out, right? And they start snipping at each other. They're not getting sleep at night because they're hearing these weird noises. There's a scene earlier on, like the second night we mentioned, like there's something out there in the woods and they want to go videotape it, and Mike refuses to go. Mike's like, I ain't fucking with that. The next morning they're talking about it, and Mike mentions that, it could be people in the woods fucking with them, and if it ain't that, then I'm definitely not going to fuck with that. He mentions Deliverance. He's like, you seen Deliverance? I ain't going out there, dude. Let's see how this is going to go.
It's also around this time that Mike loses his camera.
Yeah, Mike loses his camera.
They don't tell you how he loses the camera, he just kind of loses it.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that explains why they didn't have the... Things start to get really, really strange when they run across these strange little stick figure things. It's difficult to describe them. They're kind of like these little box things with little stick men on them, but they're really, really fucking creepy.
It's like bound stick craft that you would associate with witchcraft.
Yeah, they're really weird. In fact, if you have the movie, it's usually the picture on the front. I'll probably put that as our thumbnail for the video, just so you guys can see it, because it's weird looking. Things start to get even stranger and more tense between them because the map goes missing. This builds a lot of tension between Heather and Josh.
But before the map goes missing, they find more rocks outside their camp when they get up again.
Yeah.
So.
See, one of the issues with this film, unfortunately, is that it seems like you're not really sure how much time has gone by. You get the feeling they're out there for at least 4 or 5 days. because it's filmed, the way it's filmed is basically this is all this found footage kind of put together. So you kind of have to build up what's going on. So you don't know what's going on between these areas. But there's definitely a lot of tension between Josh and Heather at this point. Because, again, she loses the map. I mean, he goes off on her.
There's a lot of tension between them, but it's definitely more tension with Mike than Josh.
Well, yeah, Mike mentions it. Mike, it's all weird. And Heather is convinced one of them took the map. And so it starts a big fight between Heather and Josh.
Which is weird because they would have had to get into her back pocket to get the map.
Yeah, so it seems like she's just being paranoid. They're at this lake, and they end up just going south. They decide they're going to go south, and that's just what they're going to do because they don't have a choice. They all agree that it's very, very difficult to get lost in the United States at this point, so all they really got to do is just go in a direction, and eventually they'll get out. That's their plan. Unfortunately, every time they go a direction, they just end up back at this river. And then that night gets even worse because at this point the tent starts shaking and they all run out because they're freaking out. When they come back in the next morning, Heather sees something in the woods at this point too. She freaks out, wondering what the hell it is. They come back that next morning and all their stuff has been thrown around, and Josh's stuff in particular has a bunch of
weird blue goo.
Yeah, weird blue goo on it, which makes him afraid. At this point, they've been, like I said, they've been going back and forth to the lake. And I'm not really sure if this blue goo thing happened before or after this, but Mike admits...
Kicked the map into the river. Before he tells them he kicked the map in the river, they start a little laughing fest.
Yeah, they're laughing at Heather because her legs got wet in the lake or something. So it seems like everyone's losing their patience with Heather in particular.
And they're finding her misery funny.
Yeah, well, I mean, they all get wet, too, but it seems like, it really does seem like there's a lot of tension, because Heather really is kind of like a micromanager. And again, this whole time this is all going on, she is looking at this like a documentary. These guys are like, look, I just want to go home, I got a girlfriend, I got to get this camera I rented back before they charge me crazy amounts of money. The other guy just wants to go home and see his parents, and get have some food. They're running out of food, too, they're not sleeping at night, so they really are all just biting at each other, and it's turning into a freaking nightmare. This is what this story does really, really well, is it builds this atmosphere of paranoia, tension, and just disharmony amongst these three people. Added with the fact that you don't really know what's out in the woods. They have a couple theories. Some of them think it might be the witch. They also think it might be these just weird locals fucking with them, but they don't really know.
And then they have a long pause for no reason that Josh or Mike can't explain to Heather.
They're all sitting down, they're tired and exhausted, they're not trusting each other. At this point, Josh and Heather sort of make up because, they realize Mike did this. And they end up Mike and Josh actually fully tell Heather, look, even before we lost the map, we were still getting lost. So ultimately, we're all arguing, and it's like we're all being assholes, basically. They all agree to just kind of work together again. And this is where the story really picks up, because that night, they wake up, and Josh disappears. And it's Mike and Heather, and they're freaking out.
They run out of smokes, too. That's one of the things that really bothers them.
Yeah. Josh disappears right as they're starting to get along again and starting to figure out what they're going to do. And again, they just keep going different directions, and they just end up back at this river.
For 15 hours going south, it ended up right in a circle.
Yeah, this was mentioned by... this is one of the more tense scenes in the movie. This was before Josh disappeared. He was videotaping Heather and just telling her, we're in the woods, we're lost, we can't do anything. He loses his patience with her about this whole not taking what's going on seriously.
When Josh goes missing, Heather and Mike actually start to somewhat make up too.
Yeah, they end up starting to work together because they have to. And they're looking for Josh. And again, they keep traveling. They end up back at this river constantly. At this point, too, they wake up, they turn off all their lights, and this was mentioned with Josh. Josh had disappeared after they had turned off all their lights. But the next night after that, Heather wakes up, and there's a bag, and she opens it up, and she finds... And it's actually really difficult to see what it was. I mean, I saw, teeth,
and I thought it was his teeth and tongue.
His teeth and tongue. It also kind of looked like a baby bird from the right angle. It was really hard because you didn't see it for very long. Heather's freaking out and trying to act like everything's okay. She doesn't tell Mike about this. We're getting towards the end of the film, and this is where things get really, really weird because they end up finding a house in the woods. At this point in time, they start hearing Josh calling for help. So they go into this house, and it says old abandoned house. I don't know where they found this fucking house.
It's scary as hell looking, I'll say that much.
Yeah, it looks like something out of Chernobyl, right? Like, they go up the stairs because they hear a voice upstairs. And this is where it gets strange, too, because it almost seems like with the stairwell, that like they keep going up the stairway. It's almost like they're just like way more stairs than there would be in this house. Like they go up a stairwell, they turn around, they go up a stairwell, they turn around, they go up a stairwell.
We find out pretty soon that it's what I can only guess is a house that one of the locals told him about earlier.
Yeah, we assume that this is the house the crazy guy lived in. Like we said, we mentioned that story earlier about a killer that would take kids in pairs, and he would take them down into his basement, and he would have one look in the corner while he murdered the other one because he didn't like the eyes on him. And this is where all these theories you start to wonder what's going on, because you never get a clear answer, right? They go up the stairwell all the way after hearing the voices, and then they hear the voice downstairs. So they go down the stairs, and like I said, it might partly, I don't know if this was intentional, but they're switching between cameras, so it often seems like the stairway just keeps going way longer than it should.
And at certain points, it sounds like the wrong person is yelling first.
Yeah, like we almost hear Heather screaming at the top of her lungs as Mike goes down the stairwell first. And when he gets down into the basement, he drops the camera, and then we pan over to Heather's camera, and Heather goes down, and we see Mike standing in the corner, facing away from her, and then she screams, she drops the camera, and all we hear is this shriek of terror, and then the film just blacks out. So there are a few things we missed, details here and there. There was also that scene where Heather cries. It was a pretty good scene. It's probably the best acting in the movie. But yeah, that's pretty much the movie, guys. Things we want to talk about, though. So
I'm just going to something else right now. I can't believe Heather, her actor, got a Razzie for this film.
Yeah. It was mentioned that she got... The film, when it came out, got pretty good reviews, but a lot of people, like Siskel, Ebert, those two guys, I've never understood why people like their reviews. I've always found them to be kind of pretentious asshats. They're usually the same guys that shit on Friday the 13th because it was a film that didn't teach anybody anything.
And then one of them made this horror film that was just completely asinine.
Yeah, just about evil trannies, I guess. I don't know. It was dumb. I actually insulted them before. I really don't get why people like these fucking assholes. But so she got a Razzie. She does a good job. Like, let me make this clear. The acting's not the best, but it's believable. Yeah, it's believable acting enough to the point, especially in the scenes that really, really matter. And yes, they do seem to have, like conversations that don't really seem to be important, but that's just because it gives you more of an authentic feel for the characters.
Definitely not Razzie worthy, because when there's tension, you definitely feel it.
Yeah, like that scene where she's crying, and other than like her nose dripping a little bit, like where she's crying and she's begging for forgiveness for everything that happens, like you get into that scene, it's actually pretty authentic.
And when Mike admits to kicking the map into the river, you definitely feel the tension there. It feels real.
Yeah, because at this point in the film, they're laughing and they're joking around, and you feel that it's one of those moments where, like, what the fuck did you just say? You know, it takes a second, react, right? Eduardo Sanchez.
And Daniel Myrick.
And the way that they did this film, particularly for the wood scenes, the worst acting, by the way, is probably in the beginning of the movie, where they're in the town. It is really stilted, and it does seem like these people are reading a script. The beginning of the film, I can see why people might critique that, but when we get into the forest, that's where it gets real. And the reason that this film seems so authentic is because of the way the directors did this film was basically, he had all the actors come together, and he left them at a camp with instructions, directions of where they needed to go, things they needed to talk about, vague ideas for the dialogue. And he would have them travel to these locations, and at each location was food for them for the day and more instruction. But what he would do is every time they went to a new location, he would give them a little less food and more vague instructions. At night, when they're supposed to be sleeping, you see the video cameras basically, he really was doing stuff to keep them awake all night. So the reason they look so tired and exhausted, and a lot of the film is really authentic, is because they weren't eating and they were not getting much sleep. Like, in fact, the reason Josh disappears the way he does, and they seem really freaked out, is that Josh was actually told, without them being told, disappear. And they were told something's going to happen, but they weren't told what. Another scene, too, that brings up the authenticness, like one of the best scenes is her freak out when she goes, "What the fuck is that?" in the woods. It was actually, the director had somebody with like some kind of mask on. She didn't actually videotape it. This just added to the film. She originally was supposed to. They wanted to have a monster originally with the film, but they just didn't have a budget. In fact, I believe if you look online, you can Google Blair Witch like action figure, and it's like, it looks really corny, honestly. The film works because you don't actually see what's going on, and you're not actually sure. Is it a killer? Is it a bunch of people just fucking with him? Is it a ghost or a witch?
Is it one of them fucking with the others? You don't know.
Yeah, like one of the theories is that this idea that the two guys are on a plot to kill Heather. Now, I don't necessarily buy this theory, 'cause I think it's a little convoluted. It doesn't make much sense. One theory, I've heard two versions of the theory. One is that Josh is actually the killer, and secretly all along he's been getting them lost, right, bringing them out there. And then the second theory is that the two guys are in it together. Honestly, after seeing the film twice, I don't really see it. But, that's the thing. That's the beauty of this film, is it's set up in a way where you can kind of come to your own conclusion. Problems with this film. Obviously, the acting can be an issue, especially in the beginning of the film, and it can make it hard for people to get invested in the film. The videotaping is, again, amateurish. Normally that would be something you would go against, but it actually works for this film, so that's fine.
And it gave birth to a whole genre of movies like that.
Yeah, it did. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, though, because I just fucking hate those.
I don't like the VHS movies. Never liked Cloverfield.
Cloverfield was so bad. Other issues, though, not a lot happens, so if you're not somebody that's into atmosphere, you're probably going to hate this film. Because I've heard people say this is one of the most boring films they've ever seen. Me, myself, I'm a huge Lovecraft fan, and I love films like that. My favorite kind of horror is films where it's this unknown thing, or this dangerous force you don't really understand.
And I just really, really love corny movies, so this sings to me. I love it.
Yeah. And it does have a bit of cheese to it. Like, the references it makes a lot of are pretty dated. Like, it's definitely set in the fucking 90s. This film would not work if it was, a little older. Like, there's no cell phones. They don't have a pager, but it's like, no one has cell phones. They're just out in the woods. They're listening to, like I said, they're just listening to Smashing Pumpkins while they sit in that fucking car with the roll-up windows. I got a little bit nostalgic, honestly.
Nothing wrong with Smashing Pumpkins. I love Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah, they're all wearing grunge outfits. Like, they all look like they walked out of a fucking music video from Alice in Chains.
Josh definitely looks like your typical 90s stoner.
Yeah, so, it's definitely dated, but I think that actually adds a little bit to the film. I don't know, it's a mixed bag. Sometimes you're just like, okay. And other times it just really fits in. Maybe a little more characterization. You mentioned this, actually, between Josh and Mike.
Yeah, they kind of clash, and I will get them mixed up from time to time.
Yeah, like, they don't spit enough. Like, Heather is pretty... honestly, Heather isn't well fleshed out either, because to the point where, like, the only thing we know about Heather is she's kind of a micromanager, and she really is videotaping people, and it kind of gets on people's nerves.
Kind of reminds me of film students just starting off. They're just like, hey, let's go make a film.
Well, that's the vibe that I think they were going for. But Heather also has a problem with not admitting when she's wrong. A little more characterization of them. Maybe if we could meet their parents for a little bit so that we could feel a little more emotionally connected to them. Maybe even, what they could have done in this movie is they could have had scenes with the parents after they disappeared or something.
Like in interviews with them that would have gone perfect for the film.
Because we already know they disappeared. We don't know what happened. All in all, though, it's a pretty good film. It's not for everybody. Definitely say if you're not into... atmospheric things.
If you're not into suspense, the movie's not for you.
Yeah, if you're into films with lots of action, this is just three people in the woods with a fucking camera, basically arguing constantly.
Well, yeah. They also run out of smokes at some point. They all smoke, so without smoke, tension rises a lot.
Yeah, so it definitely is. It's a gradual process. If you got to enjoy the journey, not the destination necessarily. Because even the ending's kind of goofy too. It's like literally it ends with a guy in the corner and then.
I thought it was the perfect way to end the film.
Yeah, I would say too, but like it's definitely not for everybody. Like I said, if you're like more into like slasher films, you probably will not like this film.
And from what Cool Cat tells me, apparently the second kind of ruins everything in the first one.
Oh yeah, no, I've seen the second one. Maybe we'll review that one day. I might need some alcohol before we do that, but it's definitely it basically took everything that was great about the first film and threw it out the fucking window.
Speaking of alcohol, there's a scene in the beginning where Heather's like they're drinking scotch. She's like, I want to hit it. I want a shot of that, and she clearly takes a fake sip.
Yeah. Yeah, so the film has some weird moments too. The dialogue in the beginning especially is very, very stilted and weird. Honestly though, in a way it does kind of help because it adds to the strangeness of this town almost.
They never found the second cemetery.
They never did find the cemetery, that's right. They visited Coffin Rock, and I don't think they really even show them videotaping the cabin, really. Just the outside of it.
Which really kind of sucks, because you want to see the inside of the cabin.
Yeah, but they find that house. Anyway, so that's the film. I would say it's a pretty good film. Check it out. You want to add anything?
I would also recommend it, especially if you like suspenseful films.
Not even close to the scariest thing I've ever seen.
I wouldn't call it scary at all. Like, even the part where they find Josh's teeth,
Yeah.
not scary.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's just we're jaded because we live in the age with movies that are just well beyond this. But at the time, I know it scared a lot of people. I actually remember, funny story, guys, complete random aside, but my older sister was in high school when this movie came out. And she told me this story about when she was a kid after she had seen it with some friends, and she had come home and she went to bed, and she was getting up to go to the bathroom, and I guess it was either me or my twin brother was awake, or we were like, outside or like in the hallway, and we were like staring down the hallway or away from the hallway, and we were like this silhouette in the dark, just like that guy at the end of the movie, and she was telling me how it freaked her the fuck out. But like I said, guys, any announcements from now? We're working on this new project, me and the Fuzz here on Jared Laudner. It's going to be our first history thing. Logan is not going to be a part of that, as I mentioned before, because it made him uncomfortable. Obviously, if he doesn't want to be a part of it, it makes sense. It's a pretty dark subject.
But we're also from Tucson, so that happened when we were in high school.
Yeah, so I think that's part of the reason why he didn't want to do it. Me and Logan are still doing Trigun. We're most of the way through the series. We'll get on that soon. And like I said, I'm going to be doing the Bible Man thing. Probably at least this episode and Bible Man will come out at the same time. I'm not sure about Trigun. Also, good news, we are getting a microphone set up. We got that ordered. It's on the way. Not this episode, maybe Trigun, but at the very least after that, the next episode, we should have this nice setup with a new video or audio software, because I know a lot of people have mentioned, like when they've been listening, that the audio is a problem. And we recognize that, of course. It's just limited on what we had at the time.
I will also be back for future projects.
Yes, you will. Maybe we'll get you to open up a little more. I know this is your first time. Everybody's kind of quiet.
Thank you for having me, cool cat.
Yeah, I do. So, coronavirus, updates. Like I said, I've been hearing something like 10 states now basically ended their quarantine, or partially ended their quarantine.
I think Arizona is supposed to end, from what I heard, on the 1st.
Yeah, so we're supposed to be, I know they're doing limited openings for that. So, everything should start to get back to normal, hopefully. I think the schools are still going to be closed for the rest of the school year. So.
Well, it wouldn't make sense to open them this late into a semester.
Hang in there, guys. I know everyone's been going stir crazy. I know I have. I'm not at work. It just seems like I'm at home. There's not much to do. But yeah, take care of yourselves. Make sure you're doing what you got to do. Your 6-foot thing, washing your hands, keeping your old people inside.
Lavate las manos.
Yeah. Anyway, that's about it. Have a good day. Bye.